When do you want it? You do unless I woke up in Russia this morning.
If you'll just get in the car, we can discuss all this. Honest to gosh, there's nothing going on here except...
We know what's going on.
Please don't make me do anything.
If we can only discuss this, please.
Like it, Andy, like it.
Let the go! Let the go!
Aloha nerds and welcome back to another episode of TheSalawag, Why It's Great Gut Reaction. On the show I react from the gut to things I have just seen. Last night I had the pleasure of rewatching a favorite of mine called Firestarter, directed by Mark L. Lester, starring David Keith and Drew Barrymore. We all know Drew Barrymore from Charlie's Angels, 50 First Dates, so many great things. But in this movie came out in 1984. Drew Barrymore was a little kid, and what a great performance she gave. Firestarter is based on a Stephen King novel about a father and his daughter on the run from the government. They're on the run from a specific division of the government called the Shop. The Shop specializes in experiments on people with special abilities, or using chemical compounds and various serums in order to give people special abilities. This is a really great film. If you haven't seen Firestarter, but you love, superhero films or fantasy or science fiction, I highly recommend Firestarter. And if you're a Stephen King fan, I absolutely recommend Firestarter. Holy crap, man. Like, this is a real favorite of mine. If you look at how superhero movies are done, I feel that there's a general way that they're made that's basically an action movie or a build up to a boxing match. This is essentially the way superhero movies come out. It's kind of like the genuine origin of superheroes in comics itself. Superheroes by design were designed to look like wrestlers of the time. Even Spider-Man has sort of the luchador influence. There's modern day sports is an aspect of superheroes that cannot really be removed. But I really love the sort of Stephen King approach to the supernatural. I really think there's something about, in this story, the dad, who is David Keith, who played the dad in Daredevil, by the by. David Keith plays a guy who took LSD during one of the Shop's experiments, and he has the ability to touch his head. And, well, not touching his head necessarily triggers it, but when he touches his head, he can give suggestions to you. These suggestions will make you do things or make you see what he wants to see, and he calls it pushing. That, in this movie, long before the movie Push came out, Firestarter used the phrase, you pushed him to do that thing. And the you and the push being what Keith David does to his targets. And at the same time, we have Drew Barrymore's character, who plays his daughter. And Drew Barrymore is a kid who has pyrokinesis. We've all heard of telekinesis, where you can move things with your mind. But there is also pyrokinesis, in which you can generate or expand fire at will. We get a little taste of this in X-Men 2, Bryan Singer's second X-Men film, with Pyro, who lights up a couple cars. And actually, speaking of Pyro lighted that sequence, Firestarter has that sequence. If you loved the first two X-Men films, or enjoyed any aspect of them, you probably enjoyed the action at least. That Pyro sequence where he lights up the cars is totally stolen from Firestarter. Or even if it wasn't stolen, there's definitely a sister concept going on here. It's two people had the same idea, or maybe not so much the same idea as just plain ripping it. But, Firestarter is not X-Men 2. Although I would say, if we were using that kind of comparison, I'd say Carrie is X-Men 1 and Firestarter is X-Men 2. If I had to compare these Stephen King movies based on his work to superhero movies, that's what I would say. If you love Carrie and you love the X-Men, you'll love Firestarter, because essentially it's these two superpowered people running away from the government for 2 hours, and they're hiding, trying to stay out of sight, in the dark, or in someone's house, hidden somewhere you can't tell. And, the people are terrified of them. Most people who encounter them and their abilities are completely terrified of what they see. And that's sort of the engaging part of this movie, is that it's, these powers are completely dangerous, and there's an acknowledgement to the reality of the concerns, that the concerns don't just lie with the shop. The shop is trying to do the same thing as what happens in Hulk. All Thunderbolt Ross wants is to contain the Hulk and then either use that power for the government or wipe out the Hulk. And so we have this kind of crisscross X-Men Hulk story going on with Firestarter, like just in terms of superhero-dom, for you to sort of understand what the movie's about. It's that intense quest on both sides, and both sides are right and wrong at the same time. Everyone who's afraid of Drew Barrymore has every right to be afraid of her. And everyone who's kind of thrown off or really kind of made uncomfortable by the guy who can push you with his mind, they're right to be, because that's terrifying to have to deal with someone who could just control you at a whim like that. So there's something to be said about sort of genuine fears people would have in this situation. Like this what's great about Stephen King and all the filmmakers who portray his work is that there's an understanding, like, this is much like a situational comedy, this is kind of a situational tragedy. It's only too tragic that this person with these great gifts must endure this life and must go this particular way in their life, just as a consequence of having an ability or something that is dangerous to other people. So there's kind of both a social consciousness to it, but also like a genuine human response to it. I mean, I think that's what makes it engaging. In the case of Carrie, we have a deal where, it's a situational tragedy, but the mother is religious. So the mother is not looking out for Carrie. Spoiler alert, for those who haven't seen Carrie, starring Sissy Spacek and directed by Brian De Palma, go see Carrie. That's a great movie. And a great precursor to Firestarter. But yeah, I mean, you have a situation where in Carrie, a girl has an amazing gift, but the mom's religious and sees the gifts as something coming from the devil. And there is a subtle little hint about a similar thinking in Firestarter. There's a sequence where, Firestarter is like this perfect merging of, Incredible Hulk, Logan, and the X-Men, because of all the scenarios and situations that go on. Because like Logan, we have a father and a daughter traveling cross country just trying to get away from the bad guys. And in both stories, they pull off and get the assistance of an unwitting family, a very sweet unwitting family. In the case of Firestarter, it's not actually a family. It's a husband and wife, but they're older, and they indicate wishing that they had kids themselves. So that's kind of interesting. But you kind of have the same dread as you have in Logan, which is like this danger is coming after you, and what are you going to do about it? And it just keeps coming and coming and coming. And not only is the danger coming after you, but the real danger is when the danger gets to you, and that the danger is that it's only a light to light the wick of a nuclear bomb, essentially. The Heroes definitely borrows something from Firestarter. Especially in the terms of fearing the threat of Drew Barrymore's character. Because while the father and daughter are being pursued, we have this parallel plot going on of seeing the people in charge who are trying to find David Keith and Drew Barrymore. The people who are in charge are talking to the scientists who held the experiments. And the scientists sort of in review of the abilities that the girl has displayed at only, I think she's somewhere between 8 and 10 years old in this movie. But at only that age, she is capable of setting people wholly on fire, which she does about 40 minutes into this movie, sets a guy completely on fire and then blows up a car. That's the Pyro X-Men 2 sequence I was talking about that is featured in Firestarter. So just reacting to the sheer potential of her power, the scientists suggest that when this girl ages, her powers will get stronger, and how powerful she's gotten in only a few years. She may become powerful enough to create a nuclear blast by willing it to be, or cracking the earth in half. And this power is very seductive. Martin Sheen is in this movie as one of the men in charge. And he is so excited by this power. This power now, rather than being afraid of it, he's excited. He sees this is his ticket. This is his ticket to success and rising in the shop and becoming, maybe the president someday. There's something, just sheer ambition represents Martin Sheen's character. That he is ambition with no fear of the consequences. No fear of what could happen should he fuck up. But every other character around him is absolutely terrified of the consequences and would rather he not do what he does, which is try and capture them and train the girl. They all feel that the knowledge that they have is enough to be terrified of this little girl. And it would be better just to kill her, if anything. And that's really the burgeoning point. Like, the father is trying to prevent her from being captured. And all the king's men are trying to convince the king, hey, don't capture this person. If you must go to this person, kill this person. This is too much power to be held in the mind of one individual person. And the movie feels slow on the whole. Certainly the first time you watch it, it feels very slow. But truth be told, it's every time I watch it, the movie feels a little bit faster. Because there's quite a few sequences in this movie right up front. The movie starts off with the do what I say in my mind. Right off the bat, the movie starts off with the father and daughter on the run, and the father using his powers in order to push thoughts into men's minds to do what he wants in order for them to escape the bad guys. Just the fact that that's happening right off the bat, the movie has an energy to it, a forward motion. And so even though it slows down during sequences where they're meeting new characters and we're getting more setup and build up of the threat of the girl, at all points in this movie, these two are kind of on this road trip of hell. Or rather, escaping hell and damnation. But all hell is due for the shop, because so many people get harmed and killed in the process of pursuing this father and daughter, that it's almost like, well, what's even the point? What is even the point here? But when they finally, spoiler alert, they do capture David Keith and Drew Barrymore. And then that becomes a whole nother section of movie. That's really, to me, I think, the best section of the movie, because one of Martin Sheen's men, who is his top assassin, who kills anybody who potentially threatens this organization, he takes on a role and befriends the daughter, pretending to be a janitor or a guy or a maintenance guy, and essentially befriends the daughter and gets her to participate through their friendship by her trusting him and having someone to trust rather than waiting for the father to come around and tell her to agree with them. He simply takes the initiative, and she's like, it's a little kid. I can manipulate this little kid into thinking I'm a good person and get her to do what I say. And that just the fact that he thinks of that, just the fact that this guy who's supposed to be the henchman is the guy who comes up with this plan. And not only that, states right away that he wants the girl when they're done with her. Meaning he knows that they're just trying to get a certain amount of information out of her, a certain amount of studying so they can either replicate or manipulate her. But whenever they're done, he wants her. And it's very creepy sounding, and very scary sounding. And later he will clarify he intends to kill her. And in her dying breaths, hopes that she'll burn him away to death and take his soul to heaven or hell, wherever it may go. And that's some heavy stuff right there. I mean, Firestarter is not your family-friendly movie. It's an R-rated movie. And Drew Barrymore, little kid Drew Barrymore, kills a lot of people. I mean, she has a massive body count that even Rambo would be I don't know if Rambo would be impressed by, but he might stop and say, okay, that's a lot of dead bodies. Firestarter is a very, very unique and special movie in that sense, because it's got really great characters. All of them, it's kind of like how people felt during the Dr. Manhattan Project or during the nuclear testing. Like, here people are experimenting again on wonderful and terrible things that we know will only be the potential lead to our doom. And we walk straight into it. We walk straight into that bright light that will certainly turn us into nothing. And so, it's sort of the next level up from Frankenstein. Once you've made the Frankenstein, what happens with the Frankenstein? That's very much what I feel that Firestarter is. Because none of these characters, what's cool about this movie is that none of these characters will change their mind. None of these characters are flimsy or not made of some kind of stern concept of what they want and who they are. And they're all kind of right and wrong at the same time. It's a very interesting dynamic of characters. Normally, some kind of character represents right and wrong. But in this movie, is the father right for keeping his daughter away? They have a whole series of flashbacks that show the father completely justified in trying to protect his daughter and his family and all that. Because the shop comes after the family as soon as the girl develops these abilities. And they essentially kill the mother. And the father, through pure luck and chance, upon discovering his wife dead, realizes that his daughter must not be home. And goes to the daughter's friend's house, and there finds the daughter in the process of being kidnapped by the shop, and then uses his abilities to make the kidnappers blind. And just, you're blind. I'm blind. You know what I mean? Like, that is some freaky stuff right there. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of great sequences, a lot of great characters. The actor who plays the henchman, I slip on his name right now, but the character name is like Songbird or Riverbird or something like that. And he's toward the little girl quite warm and kind and inviting and seems like a good guy. But truthfully, he is the big bad wolf who's come to devour Little Red Riding Hood. But this Little Red Riding Hood happens to be a pyrokinetic. Uh-oh. But it's just this journey, this desperate journey of two people to try and make it, that makes the movie really accessible and good. It's a family story. The stakes are personal, and it's all up front and it's all moving. I think the problem with movies today is that this obsession with plot and this obsession with nostalgia and achieving something that someone else achieved 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, how about you move the ball forward? How about you tell your own personal story and stop copying something you loved that came out before you were born? This movie is an adaptation of something that came out not that long before it was written, but it's an adaptation of something that's current. That's something that was a current concern. In the 70s, there are known experiments, psi experiments, LSD experiments on people trying to develop a stronger super person. All this stuff was still happening and keeps happening. Men Who Stare at Goats, which takes place during the Iraq-Afghanistan war, is about psyops, and it's about the development of psyops since the 60s and 70s. Firestarter is real, and it was happening at the time, and probably continues to this day. It's real life, actually. It's not a comic book. It's not a fiction. It's not a nostalgic thing from 30 years ago. It's happening right now to somebody. And we'll find out who that person is when they get on YouTube and make a podcast about how they can move objects with their mind. But, my point is, this movie works because it's current and because it's real and because the story is moving and there is a story to it. A father wanting to protect his daughter. That is all you need story-wise. Protecting his daughter is how he can be happy. If he can just protect his daughter, he can feel relief. Because the whole movie, he's just racked with the strain of using his abilities, but is also the strain of a parent. The strain of a parent trying to be a parent in a rough, awful world. And the strain of a kid to control herself is the strain of a kid who has a temper tantrum and has these flaws that they have difficulty controlling, but must control in order to grow up, and because they see a problem child in a good home. Except the good home is just two people wherever they can go because they're forced onto the street. It's a rough movie about rough stuff going on. Firestarter really gets me for just how dark it is, how messed up it is. There's just something and it has a heart to it because they really properly set up the relationship between the father and the daughter. And they don't dwell too much on anything. When we go into the flashbacks, we don't have 45 minutes of flashbacks sort of working on everything. It moves. When we go into flashbacks, we immediately go to the mother being alive and how the mother and father meet, and they meet during these LSD experiments, and they're the only ones who come out with powers. And this is kind of like Batman Begins, or a good book, or something that's not the Dark Knight trilogy, like Batman Begins, we have this sort of parallel flashback storyline that tells us these little snippets that tell us the whole story. When we, after the meeting, we then see them have a daughter. No, we don't see the birth or anything like that. They just cut to years later. They're parents, and they have Drew Barrymore as a daughter. It's about a year prior to the start of the movie as we're seeing it, and the daughter's testing her abilities, and they're kind of helping her do it. It's very simple. It's a very simple kind of movie. It's just a universal tale. It's just parents trying to be parents and trying to help a kid who, again, like a situational comedy, or in this case, situational tragedy, trying to help a kid who has a very dangerous gift. And then you add on to the shop and the government and that kind of real life stuff that goes on. And that's terrifying. That makes a really uniquely juicy, movie. It makes a really uniquely juicy experience to watch. You know what I mean? There's something personal going on, and it's personal between all the characters, and the consequences will affect all the characters. And I gotta say, this movie, spoiler territory, big spoilers, this movie beats The Matrix to stopping bullets. The Matrix was a movie that blew my mind when Keanu Reeves said no, and the bullets were fired at him, and the bullets stopped right before his hands. That blew my mind. But decades before The Matrix, there was Firestarter, and at the end of this movie, the bad guys kill David Keith right in front of Drew Barrymore. Spoiler territory, I said. I'm spoiling the end of the movie now. And Drew Barrymore unleashes her full power on the entire shop. Blows up the entire facility. One car, one building, one guy at a time. She literally produces fireballs out of thin air and erases people. It's just like... even though it's dated, it's still a shocking, violent ending. The technology isn't so dated that the filmmaking is ineffective. That this is a really shocking way to end the movie, with just fire everywhere, light everywhere, everyone's burning. It's nighttime, but it's as bright as daytime. And it's dark and scary and violent, and this kid is causing the deaths of everyone in this facility. No help from any other mutants. It's such a shocking ending, and a sad ending, and an ending that's set up from the very beginning. Because her powers, when we're first introduced, are very small and very understandable and relatable. Where the very first time we see her use her powers, she's overhearing a guy and his girlfriend fighting, and the girlfriend is clearly pregnant, and she's just asking for him to be a part of the baby's life. And he's saying, I don't want nothing to do with it. And he treats her like crap, is really mean to her. And Drew Barrymore gets mad and focuses on the guy's shoes and sets his shoes on fire. And he runs away and jumps into a toilet. He runs into the women's bathroom and jumps into the toilet to get his shoes to not be on fire. But at the end of this movie, she's burning entire buildings down. She's not... By the end of this movie, she's burning people down whole within seconds. And she's blowing up cars and blowing up buildings within seconds without much thought at all. And, the transformation of this innocent person with, a violent proclivity into a complete justified murderous person. That transformation is the story. That, everything builds to that. Even she herself doesn't want to release this power. She understands that it's dangerous. And what makes it both tragic and beautiful at the same time is her accepting that she has no choice but to just unleash it all and to truly be the Firestarter that she is. Because that's the only way she's going to get free. That's the only way she's going to get free from these people who will not let her up, who will not let her breathe, and who will not let her be free. And that's crazy. That's just, that is how you tell a story with someone who has gifts, with unusual gifts. WandaVision kind of gets into that territory a little bit. WandaVision's not bad of a show. But, it has these Disney and, just general audience PG-13 limitations. But with Firestarter, you can go all the way. You can really tell what would happen. And why it would happen. And, the why is huge. The motivation for why it's happening is huge. And again, incredibly personal. So, hats off to the Mark L. Lester and the cast and the crew. I've read somewhere that Stephen King was not happy with his movie, despite it being the most accurate to his book. But I love this film. I think Firestarter is fantastic. And I highly recommend it. So, that being said, go check out Firestarter. I've already spoiled it for you, but it's still a great film. If you like this, remember, do not subscribe, don't like, and don't comment. And aloha. Take it easy, people.